It was good to say goodbye to 2025. New years offer new opportunities. We can turn over a new leaf or make New Year's resolutions. But the first week of 2026 has not felt so new. It feels like more of the same, and maybe a little bit worse. First came the invasion into Venezuela, the capture of Maduro, and the death of approximately 40 Venezuelans. Then we marked the 5th anniversary of January 6th and the assault on our capital. All the people who did that are free. And next, the killing of Renee Colgood, a widow and mother of 3 children, by ICE agents in Minneapolis. In the wake of such significant and horrifying events, the leadership of this country mocks international law, spews falsehoods about Renee Colgood, amongst many other things, and lacks any moral leadership, compassion, or attachment to truth. A few days ago, about a week ago now, Ezra Klein hosted an episode of his podcast, and it was named, "This Question Can Change Your Life." Has anyone listened to it? Some? Okay. I'm a regular listener of Klein's podcast, but I had missed this one, and Becca pointed me to it. During the episode, Klein, who has a meditation practice, talks about how hard it is right now to stay present and less reactive in this very unsettling world of ours. How do we resist our constant need for certainty, our impulsivity? He puts the question to Stephen Batchelor, a Buddhist meditation teacher and author who has written a book with his wife Martine called, "What is This?" What drew me into the episode was their discussion about how curiosity, doubt, and wonder can open us up when we ask this question, "What is this?" over and over again. In fact, the author, Stephen Batchelor, spoke about doing this practice 12 hours a day, staring at a wall, asking the question over and over again, "What is this?" That will not be my personal practice, but still the point was well taken. What is this? Keep asking that question. What would it mean to sit in that question? What is this? What is this? The question resists certainties because it was continually asking, what is it? So if you knew what it was, you wouldn't keep asking. Instead, it invites an exploration beyond our immediate thoughts and reactions and lets us sit in the feelings of what they present for us in that particular moment and open a door to what it might reveal. It resonated deeply in me because it's difficult, I think, for me, many of us, if not all of us, to live in this world where harshness and cruelty abounds, fueled overwhelmingly by those in the highest powers of offices of power. Listening to the news this week, I found myself, on the one hand, feeling rage and heartbreak and righteous indignation, and on the other hand, I sensed a part of me like was dying, with a sense of despair and a sense of shutting down, the sense of profound constriction, where nothing could penetrate. Life under this administration has made despair par for the course. Add to all that we are living in a post-October 7th world, both here and in Israel, and it comes with many things, with fear of anti-Semitism, with despair and rage also at the Israeli government, with profound concern and heartbreak for the inability to move past any sense of possibility for what's to come. We're living this world where everything is divided into perpetrators and victims, good and evil. There's a box for every person, every experience to fit into neat categories of certainty, which often feel impenetrable. It makes it hard even to live in community and hope for a path forward. Beyond whatever our activism might be at this time, and I know many here are very engaged on the issues at hand, how do we stay open and porous to what might be possible, both in the soul and in the world outside of us? How do we stay open and porous? And so the question, what is this, invites us to pause, to get curious, to go beyond our own immediate reactions, assumptions, and to push beyond our constriction and ask a question. What is this? As we open a new book in the Torah this week, the book of Shemot, we encounter a new landscape for the Israelites. Yaakov, Yosef, and their generation have died off. And the Torah says, Uvnei Yisrael par'u vayishritzu vayirbu vayatzmu bim'od ma'od v'timalei ha'aretz otam. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. Vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. A new king arose who did not know Yosef. This, according to most, is the major turning point in the story, when things go downhill. It's the moment we realize that something has changed, and the moment we know it's not going to be good for the people of Israel. Many commentators at this point ask Batchelor's question, what is this? What is happening in this moment? And one response is that a new king, a new pharaoh did come to power, and with a change of leadership comes a new story, right? And another response suggests that it was the same pharaoh, the same king, but he enacted new policies as if he had never known Yosef. Paro, the king, has become fearful, according to the commentaries, because the Israelites have grown so numerous. They're proliferating in such capacity, and so he becomes very afraid of what's going to happen with the Israelites. Though, as Dr. James Loeffler writes, his fear, Pharaoh's fear, oscillates incoherently. The Hebrews might be allies with external enemies, or they might flee, depriving Egypt of slave labor. Are they a potential fifth column who will join Egypt's enemies, or valuable assets whose departure would weaken the kingdom? The Israelites are both an external threat and now also a demographic danger. It's very interesting if you think about that in response to the world we're living in. I'll leave that for another time, but it is worth reading Dr. James Loeffler's piece on this week's Parashat, which is in, I think it's Reform Judaism. It is this fear of Paro, the fear that either the Israelites are going to attack because they have come numerous, or because they're going to disappear and Egypt will lose its force, its labor force, that precipitates the force that Paro, that Paro uses on the Israelites. And as Talmud Sota describes it, the Egyptians' decision to entice the Jewish people into slavery, which began gradually, subjugating them until they lose their freedom completely. It speaks about how first they just invited them to do some labor, and then it became harsh labor, and then it became more, and then they were completely enslaved. And so our story is told with the evil Paro, the enormity of the suffering of the Israelites, and the trajectory of this narrative from slavery to freedom, our redemption song, the leitmotif of our tradition, and often the story we return to day in and day out, both in our liturgy and in our world writ large, when we think of course, also what's coming up next week, marking Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, how he used this story as the leitmotif of the civil rights movement. When the 16th century Italian commentator Sforno asks, what is this? What is happening on these two verses of the proliferation of the Israelites and the arisal of the new king? He takes a radically different response and focuses on the language of, in the verse where it says, Vayishritzu, Vayishritzu, which literally means swarmed, that the Israelites swarmed Egypt. And he states, after the last of the original 70 migrants had died, the Israelites' whole lifestyle became more like that of creeping insects, creatures headed for destruction. Sforno notes that though the annals of Egyptian history must have recorded how Yosef saved Egypt from the famine and therefore was highly esteemed, the idea that the present-day Hebrews deserve special consideration on account of their illustrious forebears did not occur to anyone observing the way these Hebrews behaved at the time. In fact, that means that Paro, there is a reason Paro didn't recognize them, because they weren't behaving the way they used to behave. They had lost their traditions. They had lost their distinctiveness. As Aviva Zornberg writes, in 2 generations, they lost their claim to their own names. There are no names mentioned actually after the list of names when the people come down to Egypt, which begins Ve'ele Shemot, the beginning of the Parashat. Once the names of that 70 group, there are no actual names of people until Moshe. So she writes, in 2 generations, they lost their claim to their own names, and their swarming is not a token of blessing, but a symptom of alienation from that true self that even a pharaoh will acknowledge. Sforno offers a disruptive answer to what took place during the opening lines of the book of Shemot. He indicates that the Israelites distinguished themselves not because of their spiritual refinement, but quite the opposite. And in contradiction to many commentators like Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, a midrash that states that the Israelites merited going forth from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, because they hadn't changed their names or their language, or they didn't slander one another, Sforno contends that the Israelites' moral decline and assimilation was their very own responsibility, and it was in fact a part of who they were before they became enslaved. I want to pause for a moment because one might conclude then that Sforno's understanding absolves Paro, but it does not. He is still cruel. He dehumanizes the Israelites. He exploits their vulnerability, and he is guilty, 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 even if he is not solely responsible for the predicament of the Israelites. And of course, he is not only abhorred by the Israelites, but by God. If we sit with Sforno's radically different approach to the behavior of the Israelites, we might sit with that question: what is this? What is this about this story of our people? We might live into the depth of the complexity of the story rather than simplifying it, and into the depth of the complexity of our own predicament, and live and sit into it. What is this? What might be possible when we resist a simple narrative? Aviva Zornberg writes, Sforno has constructed a narrative of failure guilt, punishment, where the biblical texts seem to give us only the facts of suffering. Concentrating on responsibility for one's own predicaments creates an emotional world in which inner growth becomes imaginable. I'm going to say the second part again. Concentrating on responsibility for one's own predicaments creates an emotional world in which inner growth becomes imaginable. So, what then is the story of redemption if we think about it from Sforno's perspective? Because if you think of the story of the people of Israel according to Sforno's read, it really changes the meaning of redemption. If you think that the Israelites were not pure, that they were not just God's people, if they were more complicated than the ones that had to be saved, it changes the meaning of redemption. Redemption, then, is not simply rescue from oppression or extraction of the innocent. It is not only liberation from Egypt, but salvation from moral erosion. It is not only about taking off the shackles of bondage, but a restoration of human and spiritual dignity. Sforno undermines the comforting idea that suffering automatically ennobles. Suffering alone does not purify. Israel's affliction does not begin because they were already enslaved. It unfolds alongside spiritual coarsening. Redemption, then, cannot be earned by pain alone. Redemption cannot be earned by pain alone. Sforno's reading also does not idealize the redeemed. God acts not because Israel is blameless, but because they are in danger of disappearing as a moral people altogether. Redemption is thus an act of covenantal commitment, not moral endorsement. Too. Redemption is thus, it's rough to be a baby. Redemption is thus an act of covenantal commitment, not moral endorsement, a rescue motivated by love, not by merit. And of course, in this narrative telling, if Israel is not fully virtuous at the moment of redemption, then the Exodus is not the climax of moral achievement. It is the beginning of moral responsibility, which is actually the way the Torah is constructed, of course, because we get the Torah after the Exodus, which supposedly should be the guide path for moral responsibility. Sforno's reading makes the Exodus into not an enduring kind of leitmotif for this powerful story of redemption, but an enduring cautionary tale. Assimilation and comfort and cozying up with power can corrode just as much as persecution. Redemption is needed not only when we are oppressed and endangered, but when we are losing ourselves. The danger is not only external hatred, but internal erosion. This story of redemption that appears in this book and starts in the very beginning of these first psukim, of these first verses, resets our narrative. It arrests the dehumanization and moral decline and degeneration of Israel. And it teaches us, we, and by extension the world, in all of the complexity of our existence, that everyone is still redeemable. There are plenty of Paro's living amongst us, and Paro's crimes abound in our world. The hatred of the other, the immigrant, the stranger, the hunger and abuse of absolute power, the disregard of basic decency, the desecration of language itself, and a commitment to the truth. This is the water that we are all swimming in. This is the culture of the world we are living in. This is the leadership that is being modeled in this country, and in Israel too, and in many places around the world. And it is certainly possible, and even probable, either to become immune to its perniciousness, or to become adaptable to it and complicit in it, or to become so hardened then we can't see any way out. All of those things are Mitzrayim. All of those things are servitude. And so, it is our religious duty, I believe, to ask ourselves, what is it? Because by asking of ourselves, what is it, we open up the possibility of not being so hardened. And instead of hardening our hearts and living in our certainties and in categorizing the world in all these boxes and desperately preserving our own sense of rightness and infallibility, maybe we, like Sforno, as individuals, as a Jewish community and Jewish people, and as Americans, need to invite in our questions and doubts and stay with the uncertainty of it all and what is unknowable and the things that we will never know. And in the question, what is this? What is this? Find the ethical and moral demand. Then maybe, just maybe, redemption will be on its way. Shabbat Shalom.